Welcome to Scorpio Bookshelf. I'm Joaquin.
And I'm Morgan. And this is a podcast about books, besties, and escaping reality. If you could not tell, we are both already laughing because we just recorded the first 10 minutes of the pod and I had the wrong microphone connected.
That's a Friday vibe, actually. Okay. So let's try this again. We are hopping right into buddy reads, and that is our absolute bread and butter. We buddy read a lot, but it's a little bit less than I actually expected as we were doing the counts before even hitting record. But buddy reads are a thing. It goes along well with our absolute midnight texts. We're texting any time of the day, even though we're supposed to be working. we're reading, but
I think we thought we buddy read more than we did because most of the time one of us finishes a book, immediately goes, hey, chokehold, you have to read this.
So what is the time frame between us saying that and the other person reading it to count pretty much as a buddy read?
So that's why I'm saying there are a couple of fantasy books or cozy fantasy books that I think we could count as buddy reads because one of us finished it and immediately the other person went into it.
True. And the other person was like, oh, I'm about to finish this one anyways. I might as well hop right into it.
Yeah. So I think there's somewhere there's a period of time that we could accept calling it a buddy read, even if it wasn't a planned one.
I'm going to say if it's within the week that the other person said, try this, I'm going to count it as a buddy read because some
That's
people have book clubs and buddy reads and it takes the other person like a month and a half before the other person finishes.
Well, yeah, a lot of times book clubs are within a month. So as long as you read it within the same month and talk about it within the same month, it's considered like the book club book. So if that's the theory that we're functioning off of, we buddy read like everything.
Yes, this is true. Except for maybe the Stephen King, because you have been in that realm for so long and I just hopped in recently.
True.
But you're right. Almost everything else is considered a buddy read. On that, what makes a good buddy read for you?
I think, thinking of us in particular, because I don't really buddy read with anyone else at this point, things that make a good buddy read are books that have good, solid stopping points where you can be like, I'm going to slam my book closed and I'm going to text about what just happened. I think that's what makes thrillers such a good buddy read choice for us, because thrillers have really good, hard, build up, something crazy happens. Build up, something crazy happens. Whereas fantasy is very, every chapter you're figuring out new information. Every chapter there's new magic, new people, new world building, new whatever. And if you don't stop after every time something happens, you're not going to talk about it, and you're just going to keep breezing through.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm along the same lines. Fantasy, one chapter at a time. You can chunk out a good thriller, which also makes it feel like you are breezing through it and they're actually doing it quite quickly. The thrillers in general are quite quick, so it's not that difficult to just get through a thriller, especially since our thrillers are who we are to our core. Being able to,
I think thrillers make good buddy reads for us because we would read them on our own as well.
Right. Yeah. And if you are like us, when we're not just people, well, you're not as close to somebody, so you would only message them, you feel like, during regular scheduled programming hours of the human life. But with us, it's it'll be 2 a.m. and one of us is still up reading, so we'll message the other person, or the other person's up at 6:30 a.m. reading before work and is like, oh my gosh, this happened. Oh, hi, good morning. And it's like, okay, cool. So having a large time frame to just rat out and read and reply to text and stuff like that is really cool, which I can give a nod to Fable for that, because of the other person's at X chapter and you can't see what they're saying until you get to that or something, right? So if you catch up to somebody and then you're like, oh, that was their thoughts, you can get back to them on that without them spoiling it for you. I think that's cool. But we're also not the type to be afraid of spoilers.
I was just about to say, we made a Fable book club for the two of us a year ago now, almost probably, and we've never touched it. Mm-hmm. We don't have the wherewithal to stop and put updates in an app. We have to do spur of the moment panic texts for buddy reads. It can't be too planned out, or we will not do it. Which I think is the downfall of buddy reads for some people, is it's too rigid, it's too planned, it's X chapter by this day and check in by this day and thoughts on this day. No thank you. I don't read for work. Don't give me deadlines. That's not fun.
Eh,
Brother,
yes, that makes 100% sense. We have not touched it. I don't even think I have the app on my phone anymore.
Neither do I.
Okay, that's just no wonder why we have not touched it. We've tried so hard. It just didn't. It just wasn't for us. It'll work for some people for sure, but I
So I
guess.
think at the end of the day, for us, what makes a good buddy read is low pressure. Because for the two of us, we have too much other shit going on all the time.
Mhm.
If there's too much pressure to get back to read by X day, to do XYZ, we're not going to do it. We don't have the time or the mental capacity. Like, reading is supposed to be fun. If it's adding pressure, we're not going to do it.
The
So,
only
good
time we
buddy
ever
read.
do that, though, is when we're like, we want to buddy read something, so we set the start. We were like, okay, let's start it by Friday, so let's finish our books before then to
Yes.
start a buddy read, versus this is when you need to end the buddy read, which gives hype to the buddy read instead of taking it away by ruining it by a deadline.
Yes. Yes. That's fair. We will be like, hey, I finally want to read this book. Will you be done your book by Friday?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of where we set timelines. We don't actually set timelines on the actual read or chapter dates or anything like that because it's too much. It's too much. So at the end of the day, good buddy read for us, low pressure. Books have to be good natural stopping points. Short chapters are a bonus.
Oh,
Neither of us likes long chapters
anything
in
longer than
anything.
like 4. If I don't flip the page once or twice and I see the next chapter number, I'm not upset. Or I'm not gonna DNF it, but I'm not the happiest.
Like, Frida McFadden chapters are just chef's kiss.
Mm-hmm.
You see one chapter title, you flip the page, oh, there's the next one.
Yes, it's
Her
like one or
chapters are,
two. Yeah, one or
yeah,
two
are so
pages.
short.
But it's weird because they work really really well, because there's a lot going on in her thrillers that make you just, it makes sense. And it's not like she has to cut them up because she has multiple perspectives. So you need to like have them a little bit shorter. So you're like, this is happening at this point, and in the same exact time, this person's having this point. It's not even really like that. She sticks with the same person most of the time, and it just happens very quickly. It's very nice. It's refreshing. And because of those, it's a closed book. Oh my gosh, he just did this. What? And it works. It works.
Well, the nice thing I think about a book with short chapters for a buddy read is that if you're like, oh my god, I'm 5 chapters ahead of you, 10 pages, 25 pages.
Yeah.
Like, you're not light years ahead of the other person. Whereas you buddy read a fantasy and it's like, oh, I'm 2 chapters ahead of you. Well, that's 90 pages.
That's wild. 90 pages.
No, like Onyx Storm, well, some of those chapters
Mm-hmm.
were unbelievable. That's a whole book. That's a whole book how
They
long
were
some of
pretty
those
thick.
were.
They were pretty thick. And you read it on the Kindle, so the pages are different. They're extra long. It feels like you're tapping that page for like 7 years before you get to a new chapter, right?
808 pages on Kindle.
On Kindle versus it being 5 or 4, 5 something on physical.
Yeah.
So that's why when you're reading and you're tapping, and I'm like, okay, every time I start a new chapter, I flip to see how many pages before I get to the next chapter, so I know if I can commit really. And a lot of like the average right now for Onyx Storm is about 4 to 5 flips, so like 8 to 10 pages per chapter, which again isn't terrible. She's had like a good 17 to 19 page chapter every once in a while. Maybe I'm not even in the thick of it too much yet, but
You're not. But
that's cool.
also that book has the smallest font and the smallest margins. So 8 to 10 pages of Onyx Storm is like 20 to 25 pages of another book.
That makes me feel really good actually, because like I said, I hate long chapters. So I think just because it is on Onyx Storm, I'm pushing through it, but
Yeah,
that's
fair. That's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Besides the point, let's not detour too hard here. So,
Mm-hmm.
good stopping points, short chapters, punchy thrillers. We are not big fantasy buddy readers. I think we've only ever buddy read a very, very small handful, and it was mostly cozy fantasy.
Yes.
And that is mostly because, from our perspectives, fantasy is very hard to check in with. I also speed read fantasy. Joaquin likes to sit and like process fantasy. We
Yeah.
read fantasy very differently, and it would be very hard for us to in a spoiler-free, enjoyable way for both of us, check in throughout books. I literally almost just spoiled Onyx Storm for him half an hour ago.
Yeah. And that's
By total
that's
accident.
it was. Obviously it's never like on purpose, and that's fine, but I'm not the type to really hold spoilers to a high like upset rate really for me. I can listen to it and check out. If the book is long enough, I can check out before it happens. So I'm not too upset when it happens. But I guess so that's everything that makes a really good buddy read. What were some of our favorite buddy reads to do?
If you listened to last week's episode, it should come as absolutely no surprise that Roxy Cohen is going to top this list for us. We have buddy read almost the entirety of her writing library.
Yeah, really.
She currently has 5 books out. I arc read 2 before I got Joaquin into her stuff, and then we buddy read the other 3 together.
Yeah, Roxy
And they
is
are,
top.
yeah, absolutely top tier for buddy reading.
Because they have everything that we just mentioned. They have shorter chapters, natural stopping points. It's just, oh,
And they are very, like, punchy thriller vibes. You want to know what's happening. You're eager to keep reading. You need somebody to talk to about what the fuck is going on.
right. And like, even if you have to stop for whatever reason, life happens, and you try to come back, it's so easy to start reading the first couple paragraphs, just be like, oh, right, I know, and then everything flushes back, rushes back, and you're like, cool, I'm caught up. I love this. I know exactly where it's headed, and this is great.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I also think Roxy writes twists very, very well. So we can theorize for an entire book of buddy reading together, disagree, and still both be wrong.
Yeah, we did that a couple times. That's funny.
So that makes it a very good time. Like, if you like a good punchy thriller that has a romantic subplot, Roxy is your girl.
Right. I guess, I mean, other than Roxy, my favorite buddy read that we've done, other than that, is Razorblade Tears.
Same.
It was so good, which is a little bit more different than what we usually read. It is sort of not thrillery, but
That is what it's categorized as.
is it?
I believe so.
Because it is, but it also kind of isn't. It's a different take on it, and it covers a lot of heavy topics, which for us is not rare, but we like lighter stuff.
We like murder with no social commentary.
Yeah. I just want
As
to
horrible as
read
that
people dying without using my brain too much.
But yeah, Razorblade Tears was something very different for us, I think, that we both absolutely loved.
Yeah.
And it does have most of the things we talked about. It does have longer chapters, but that is because the book is a very heavy social commentary on the state of relations in the US. And I don't know when it came out. A couple of years ago, maybe? But it is a heavy social commentary on the state of things in the States for Black people and incarcerated Black people and gay people. And it was a heavy read. Like, that's not something we normally would have gone for, but it was so incredible. Like, I have no words for how much I loved that book.
It came out in July of 2021.
That makes sense.
So
that makes sense.
It's still quite new, and I'm looking at its list of awards. It's thick, and rightfully so. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm looking at my review on it on Goodreads, and I made a good point about myself. The language and the writing were at a level at which it needed to be elevated to be able to address these real world problems. So I don't know if it was last episode or the episode before, I stated that I usually have trouble with language that's a little bit too advanced for my brain to just read and follow. But because this book was so well written and just so heavy, like hitting, it forced me to really sit down and be like, I'm fully immersed. These are some really big problems. I don't experience this on the everyday. So this is a really cool perspective and angle to read at, which made me love it even more.
Yeah, I think When we're talking about the level of language in a book like this, it was an intelligence thing. Like the absolute perspective that this book gives, it's an incredibly intelligently written read. And it's not like a fantasy where we've been given long, sorry, Onyx Storm, Scottish Gaelic names that 90% of readers don't know how to pronounce.
Mm-hmm.
It's a completely different scenario, for lack of a better word. And it's definitely a heavy, hard read, but it was an incredible buddy read, and it's definitely a book that you need to talk about while you're reading it, because again, neither of us understand the struggle of the main character. We don't go through that every day. We also don't live in the States, so that
This is
also
true.
changes our perspective on things as well. But it's a book that deserves to be read in tandem with another person so that you can talk about it. It's just phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Like multiple perspectives to give the
Yeah,
different like outlooks on like being a person of POC and versus just being a regular Caucasian American with two very different backgrounds. The contrast between the perspectives, but then the overlap at the end. Oh, I
just
want to reread
phenomenal.
it. I really just want to reread it now, thinking
I
about
was
it.
just saying, talking about it is making me want to reread it. We have also got two more of that author's books on our buddy read list.
Mm-hmm.
It's S.A. Cosby, by the way, we didn't say that. So we do have two other books of his on our buddy read list, and I'm hoping they live up to how much we loved Razorblade Tears.
Me too. But I feel like now knowing this author's type of writing, I really need to be in the mindset and be very
Yes.
ready for it. So I don't think it'll be one of those Onyx Storm slump reads because I'm not going to be able to love it for what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, it won't be a spur of the moment buddy read. Sometimes Joaquin and I both don't know what we're going to read, so we'll randomly just be like, hey, let's pick a thriller, let's buddy read it, let's slump breaker this together kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Those books are not for that.
No, definitely not.
Other buddy reads that we have loved.
Yes.
I am going to throw out there Legends and Lattes. It was not a true buddy read because I read it first, but Joaquin read it immediately after because I was raving about it because I loved it so freaking much.
Mm-hmm.
And then we talked about it simultaneously for like a month after we finished it because we both enjoyed it so, so much.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, I read Bookshops and Bone Dust first and was like, get on it. I need you to read this book immediately.
I did take a hot minute for that one though.
You did.
But
It
oh
it's so good though.
yeah, Chef's Kiss, so good. I don't even.
I think buddy reading, if you're going to read fantasy together, cozy fantasy is such a good way to go because we literally spent most of those conversations talking about the likability and the growth of the characters and how cute the storyline was. And it's just one of those things that was a warm fuzzy at the end of the day. Like if you had a tough day and then you were talking about Legends and Lattes, you just can't help but smile because they're so homey and cozy.
Yeah, even just thinking about it and how I could remember when I was reading it. I'm not the type to sit in a cozy spot and like kick my feet while reading, but man, was this one just my feet were
It,
fluttering and I was the bakery and just made me want to. I could smell it. It felt very it's so good. That's my favorite type of fantasy. Just the style of the setting is my favorite. There are times where it's very Game of Thronesy fantasy where I'm like everything's a little bit too hard edged, but this one felt very. This is a really weird way to picture it, but it's like block letters in writing versus the bubble letters I used to write as a kid. Game of Thrones is block letters, and this is bubble letters. It's very smooth, and it's not harsh. Oh, so good.
yeah, I think honestly, I know a lot of people don't love cozy fantasy and to each their own, but you could kill me for cozy fantasy. I love it so freaking much, and I literally can't stop smiling just thinking about how much I enjoyed Legends, Lattes, and Bookshops and Bone Dust. Like, it makes my heart happy. We both went out and bought the special editions after because we enjoyed them sincerely so, so much. And those are also, we don't tend to buddy read audiobooks, but the audiobooks of Legends, Lattes, and Bookshops and Bone Dust are top tier because Travis Baldree reads them himself, the
Mm-hmm.
author. And they're just fantastic. Like, if you want to buddy read a low stakes fantasy, those are the ones.
Yeah.
And the low stakes still felt high stakes because I cared so much about everyone in the book.
True, because you have no idea what he was going to do, even though it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that type. Because there was still a couple battles there.
There's still conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Just the overall, overarching feeling of the book is just cozy and homey.
And for any of my like video gamers out there, if I were to compare it to some sort of nice cozy game, it's very easily either Stardew Valley or you could even do Sims because you're just there,
It
you're
does
vibing.
it does feel very like choose your own adventure type
Mm-hmm.
world built.
It's
Yeah,
I
it's just
can't
so
get
good.
I can't even yeah. But I guess with these three technically really great favorite buddy reads, what was our absolute least favorite buddy read that we mistakenly went into?
That would be The Night House by Joe Nesbo.
Oh, what a tough
Let me
time for us.
let me start by saying I think we went in blind to this. We knew it was creepy type, thrillery type vibes. And I think that's where our understanding ended of what this book was supposed to be. So let's start there. Following that, let's say we both really liked the first third of this book. The initial story building, creepy, weird phone eating children situation.
Yeah.
Great. Creepy. We were both texting each other being like, oh, that made my skin crawl. Like, And then this book goes off the fucking rails.
All I can do is laugh because I cannot think of the reasoning behind why he did what he did with this book. You're right. It started so good, and there is a thing as too many twists because
Yes.
if you twist too many times, the storyline is gonna break, and that's what I think happened with us, where we were like, "Oh my gosh, this happened," then this happened, and then this happened. Wait, and then this happened, and then next thing you know, it was a story being told about a story about a guy being told a story. I think I'm still not even mentally okay with what happened.
This storyline had scoliosis. It was so bad.
Not saying that having scoliosis is bad.
No, but I'm saying if your spine is as twisty as this book twist is, you're done for. You're not standing up anymore.
I'm looking at my Goodreads review and it literally says I have no idea what is going on. And that's true. I rated it a 2.5. I think that was being quite generous. I think you were a 2.
I rated it a 2, and my Goodreads review quite literally says, this ended up feeling like 3 disjointed stories. There are too many twists that makes this hard to follow and cumbersome to read.
It was way too difficult. I didn't understand a thing, and I read every single word on those pages with full intent and full focus. It just did not make any sense at all. It makes me feel like the guy wrote it in his native language, had 4 people translate it, and then put it through Google Translate and then print with no editors, nothing.
And go. Yeah, I have never read anything else by Joe Nesbo, so I don't know if this is typical to his writing style, but this is a short book. This is like a sub 300 page book, and we literally are separated into 3 completely different stories in that small of a time span.
I was right. It was translated.
Wait, what?
On Goodreads, it's The Night House Joe Nesbo, and then Neil Smith, translator.
Hold up.
So it for me now, kind of looking at it, it makes me feel like maybe the story and that type of layout is good for wherever Joe Nesbo's from. I think he's somewhere in like
Oh, he's
Eastern.
Norwegian. This makes so much more sense.
Okay, it does. So it makes me feel like the story and the way it's written is very much more on the Norwegian side of things. And then they were like, "Oh, it's so popular in like Europe. Let's throw it to the States, translate it, and see what happens." And it was well received. It's sitting at a 3.26 on Goodreads.
And that's pretty low.
Oh, it's super low. That's really low.
For context, some of our favorite buddy reads are currently sitting at Razorblade Tears 4.10 on Goodreads. I feel like thrillers tend to have lower overall ratings on Goodreads because people feel more strongly about the twists in a thriller than the buildup of like a fantasy per se, or the relationships in a romance per se. But it wasn't good. It just wasn't good. And maybe that's a fault of the story style and the way that it was translated. I don't know. But at the end of the day, in English, it was not good.
Right. There's another review that says blinded by a pretty cover.
True.
That is so accurate.
Because I think the cover was the reason we bought it.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
because I owned it, I think, first, and I suggested it because the cover was cool.
Yes, and then I read it.
Yeah, so blinded by a pretty cover is very accurate. We have one other buddy read.
Mm-hmm.
Why are all the bad ones my choice?
Because you suggest all of them and I follow you. It's very rare that I suggest something.
Fair. So the only other buddy read that we didn't love was Pen Pal, and I don't know how to pronounce the author's last name, but it's the one that started as a Reddit no sleep story, and I think that's where it should have stayed.
Yeah, Dathan Arbach.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yes, I also did not fully enjoy it to where it could have been, and I think if it stayed on Reddit as those creepy like threads and all that stuff, and that's its peak, that's totally okay. It should have been one of those things where if you were on the internet and doing those things during that time, only you really know what's going on or should know what's going on. But having it kind of go into an actual book.
Yeah, because I think part of the appeal of this story being on Reddit No Sleep would have been the anticipation between releases of the story. Like
Right.
the not knowing, the build up, all of that stuff. I don't think it was ever posted as one long thing. I think the parts that come out in the book were separate No Sleep posts at the time that it was being written on Reddit. Correct me if I'm wrong. I was not a Reddit No Sleep girly at the time that it was coming out, so I've only read it as the book. But this was actually almost a DNF for both of us as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we jumped to someone that narrated it on YouTube to get through it. I will say, the narration on YouTube is creepy. It is super well done. If you're going to give this a try, I highly suggest doing that YouTube audiobook style narration of it, because it made all the difference in the fact that we were genuinely not going to continue reading it, and then I found that YouTube video, sent it to Joaquin, and we both gave it a shot. It definitely ups the creepy vibes because it's so well read. And the first portion of this story is super creepy Reddit no sleep vibes.
Yes.
It's what the story amounts to that dropped both of our ratings, I think.
Yes. It was really creepy. It was well done. I agree 100%. I think if I was 13 on those Reddit posts, it would have felt a lot more creepy. But at some point, it felt just like a kid's imagination that he let run too far.
Which is kind of the basis for Reddit No Sleep most of the time. So I wholeheartedly agree that if we had been teenagers on Reddit No Sleep, it would have been a great time at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not to hate on Pen Pal or that story at all. I think it just, some things belong where they belong, and they don't need to go any further.
But we will leave the link to that audio, the Pen Pal audio, in the description because it was just really creepy and cool. So if you guys wanted to experience that, you can either search it up or we can put it in the description for you guys, but it's...
Yeah, and I think the cool thing about that audio is like you're not getting a produced audible audiobook. Like this is somebody who took the time to sit down and do this themselves on YouTube, and I think that's also pretty cool. But yeah, I think other than that, most of her buddy reads have been at least 3.5 stars, if not 4+.
Yeah, I would say they hit 95% of the time. Those were just two outliers, I think. And that was near maybe the first third of our buddy reading experience together so far. all the ones after that have been hits. And
That's true.
so it was very much finding a book and a book style genre that we knew we both enjoyed. So ever since that, now we're like, okay, we know exactly what it is. This has a really good blurb vibe, and we've heard good things. Let's hit it. But other than that, we're pretty good. But that also brings us to like mood reading and how much mood reading affects buddy read schedules, etc.
Yeah, I think a perfect example of this is we recently being like November, December, Buddy read The Only One Left by Riley Sager. Joaquin fucking whipped through this book. Whipped through this book. I died. I was 6 feet under, no light, no movement, no air. Tell me how I'm supposed to read with no air. Trying to finish this book. And it's not because it was a bad book, but it was because I was in entirely the wrong headspace when we started to try and read it, and I could not do it. It took me so long to read, and then I finally, my brain went, oh, thriller mood, and I finished it in like 2 days.
Yeah. So that's just prime example of how things go. But again, with how we are, I was like, okay, I'm done. Let me know what you think. I'm not going to spoil it. I'm just going to go into my next reads until you finish it, and I can come back and be like, oh yeah, now let's talk about it. And that's exactly what we did. It was a great book, great ending, fun twist, crazy twist.
I think in the same way that Frida makes for good buddy reads, Riley Sager makes for good buddy reads. They are a slower build than Frida.
Longer chapters,
but they are also a more, not to hate on Frida, a more intense kind of thriller than Frida. Frida is very like punchy, something is always happening thriller. Riley Sager is very like, you better be paying attention thriller, because this newspaper article that he mentioned about somebody's brother's uncle's dad matters later.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. Frida, her style is put something out there, throw a name out there, dangle it kind of in front of your face. If you just be like, ugh, just another side character, for them to come back around the next time and be like, this is what, like, oh, it's them. This is how they did it. And then she sort of explains that in her epilogue or whatever. Riley, the build-up and backstory of the main character you're reading attributes to how the twist and the person that whatever happened was in it. And like,
I want to say Riley Sager is a more tedious thriller. Mm-hmm. It's very like spiderweb style, follow the breadcrumbs, like it'll all come together, but you're not going to get it right away. Versus Frida is very like, here it is, here it is, here it is, here it is, twist, you didn't get it kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is not to hate on Frida. All of Frida's thrillers follow the same formula. So you know what you're getting when you start a Frida read. Riley Sager is very, like, I think they're all pretty slow build. I've only read 2 now, I think. They're all pretty slow build, but they're all super intricately interwoven storylines.
Yes.
So again, for a mood reader, if you're not in the mood to decode an interwoven storyline, you're probably not going to do super well.
Like, even the last Riley Sager book I read, The House Across the Lake, which is one of his better ones and like most popular ones, I wasn't completely in it at the beginning. It felt very repetitive, and
yes,
there was just like the repeating storyline. I was like, okay, I get it. This is happening. This is happening. This is happening. It didn't really have meaning in the plot line for me. And even at the end, I was like, okay, so why are we pushing this so hard? Okay, maybe it was just like a redirect for a bit. Makes you feel like her. Okay, so it was her being an alcoholic, which doesn't really. So it's like, okay, she's an alcoholic. Maybe all of these things that she's imagining or whatever isn't real because she's just an alcoholic. And it still was like, okay. But for the ending to be the way it did, because he left one little crumb of something at the beginning, mm-hmm. Oh, okay, it clicks. This makes sense. And then it ended up being really good. But you're right. If you're not in the mood to play Da Vinci Code on a specific book, then...
Yeah, and it's the same way to reference back to S.A. Cosby's books. If you're not in the mood to think about the state of racial inequality in the States, if you're not in the mood to think about police brutality, if you're not in the mood to think about LGBTQ rights and all of that sort of things, like Razorblade Tears is not going to be for you. It is not a light, happy read. it's fantastic, but it's not a light, happy read. Like, buddy reading can be hard because if you're not in the mood for the same thing, you're never going to enjoy it to the same level. And then there's kind of no point in doing it because why are you reading something you don't want to be reading? I think that's where mood reading plays in at the end of the day. It's like buddy reading is supposed to be fun. Buddy reading is supposed to be for overall enjoyment. If you're not on the same page and you're both mood readers, well, that's going to be real hard.
That's kind of where we're at right now, where we wanted to buddy read something after there's no one left, but then we were like, Onyx Storm is coming out, so we wanted to read The Color of Dragons, but we're like, Onyx Storm is coming out, and we both know that after Onyx Storm, we're going to slump really hard off of whatever happens in that book. And when we slump in that specific genre, we don't want to touch that genre. So we automatically go, okay, we can't. We have to push it because we're not going to be in the fantasy mind. Okay, so we push it. We read something in between. Morgan goes cowboys, I go thrillers. We come back in like a week or two and we're like, so where are we right now? Not really. So this is when we like push things back. And we look at our list of buddy reads and 90% is fantasy because we've knocked out all the other things that are not fantasy on it. And I mean, I want to do Color Dragons really bad. I just don't know how I'm going to be after Onyx Storm.
Yeah, Color of Dragons has been on our list for a very long time. It's something, I mean, standalone fantasy is hard to come by now, and that's what it is. It's a standalone fantasy. Um, and it's up there on our list. We've talked about it a lot, but we just haven't found the right moment. And we really want to enjoy our buddy reads together. We don't want to be DNFing. Like nobody has the time for that. I would rather push it and wait until it's something that we both really want to read. I think post Onyx Storm, another dragon book is not in the cards for me right away.
No, it isn't. But there is only one book that we did like want to start buddy reading and instantly DNF, which was Bride by Ali Hazelwood. We opened the book. We started reading the first, I don't know how many pages, went chapter too long, and closed the book.
So it's not a true DNF. It's not a true DNF. We were both like, oh yeah, Bride, let's do it. Easy, spicy, fantasy-y type situation. Joaquin started reading it before I did, and he was like, have you looked at where chapter 2 starts? And I was like, no.
Neither can I. I can't see it, and I'm 5,000 pages down the road. I still can't see it.
And we decided that was not the move for that moment, and we moved on. And that's that's how you have to function in buddy reads.
Our mental health is so fragile when it comes to reading. If even one of us senses that it's going to absolutely shatter the other person, we go, no, it's okay. We can put this off for a hot minute. And that's what that was. I was like, Morgan is not in the mood for this.
I literally hadn't even cracked the book yet. And Joaquin was like, chapter 2 is 42 pages in. Are you sure you want to do this? And I went, no, sir, I do not want to do this. Oh, God, not us cackling 2 episodes in a row.
That's who we are.
Oh, it is who we are. If you don't love us for the chaos, then you don't love us at all. That is my mantra now.
We need to make merch that says stuff like that. That would be really fun.
Coming soon.
Okay, so then now we've kind of touched on all these different things. What is our overall opinion on buddy reads versus book clubs versus Fable and online platforms?
So I think it comes down to, for me, I don't have anybody to have a book club with. I don't have that many friends. I don't have that many people who read. I don't have book club capability. So buddy reading makes more sense. I also think currently I'm a mom of 2 small kids. I don't have a lot of time to dedicate to reading most of the time. So I want to read stuff that I like. I don't want to join a book club that has 15 people that's going to pick a book based off votes, and more likely than not is going to be a romance book that I wouldn't traditionally read. That is super stereotypical, don't come for me, but every book club in my area is constantly like, oh my God, Colleen Hoover. And I'm like, oh my God, a gun to my head.
Episode 3, Morgan's Hot Takes 3. We're at a tie score right now, 3-3.
Essentially, if I could start a book club with other people who were mood readers that could essentially turn into everybody read their own thing and talk about it later, then fine. But I'm not built for book clubs. I'm really not. And that's okay with me.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. Um, we said it earlier. We don't have Fable. We don't touch Fable anymore. Did not work for us. Book clubs around my area. I live in buttfuck nowhere, so being able to even get to the nearest Walmart takes a hot minute. So trying to find a book club is difficult. I don't like other people most of the time. I am not an extrovert by any means. And you're right, I don't want to have to vote on a book. I just want to read it when I want to read it. I
I
don't want
think
to
it
have
comes back to
to
mood reading too.
schedule and like trying to find a date for everyone all the time is very difficult. So it's buddy reading is convenient. It's accessible. It can be done anytime, all the time, intertwined with other books. It just seems like the best option always.
And like I think when it comes down to it, like you can buddy read with a group of 3 or 4 or 5 people, but buddy read is non-committal. Whereas to me, book club is like every X amount of days we're reading X book, we're talking about it on X day. You have to have thoughts to share. Like it just feels like a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Why is
Whereas
it
a
school?
yeah, and whereas a buddy read is like read this for fun. When we're both done, we'll yap about it.
Mm-hmm. You have to have a you have to have a dynamic if you are doing a group that where you understand these things, which is why it's easier with one person as a buddy read, not buddies read. So, I,
Yeah. And I think too, the online platforms, I mean, they're great. We have a small group of book talk friends that I'm sure we could probably organize something with, but all of us are mood readers. And I think at the end of the day, it would be more of a chore than something fun. Is it fun when we all end up reading something and we can all talk about it? Sure. Our
Mhm.
group chat pops off. Currently, we're waiting for everyone to finish Onyx Storm so we can talk about it in the group chat. That's going to be fun. That's great. But it's not a bigger thing. If we all happen to read something, we all happen to read something and it's fun to talk about. I don't think any of us have the commitment level to make it a book club.
No, 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 no. And all of our reading speeds are so different. We have somebody who is blazing through 1,000-page books in
Hope,
three
talk
or
about
four
you.
days. Yeah, 3 or 4 days. That's hope for you. And then we have like other people who are getting slammed by life right now. Like they're in graduate programs, they're working their asses off, and we love that for them. But we don't want to put the pressure on them. We don't want them to hate reading because that's the
Yeah.
worst thing you could do for a reader is turn them so like put too many deadlines on them where they hate reading, and we don't like that. And then you just got us who are just we don't give like whatever. We don't give a fuck. We
We're
just
just
do
here.
things. Yeah, we just do things. That's
As if we aren't also getting bent over by life lately. But you know,
PG there for you.
I'm the reason we have to have an age rating on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I'm not sorry about it.
But
I think that pretty much wraps up our thoughts, our feelings on buddy reads. If you're going to take anything away from this, it is that you should find someone to buddy read Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby with.
yeah.
Above all else, that book was probably one of our top tier buddy reads.
Yeah, which also just top reads period last year. So
True.
just great. So that brings us to our bookish question of the day, which today's is share a book that you read in one sitting. I can say it's funny. It was a buddy read, and it was Never Lie by Freida McFadden. So that was a book very spur of the moment for us. We texted throughout the day and we're like, oh, I don't really know what I want to read. And then you were like, what about Never Lie, Freida McFadden? And we read the blurb and it was like, oh, this is really cool. And this was at 6 p.m. on a
Oh,
random
yeah.
weeknight. And we both crushed it and we were up until 2 a.m. Like, actually, we literally, both of us were up, and I never stay up that late. So we obliterated this book, and the twists were so fun. The storyline was great, and it just had everything that we wanted in a buddy read. And we didn't realize we were just gonna devour it that one night, so it went so quickly.
Yeah, that one was completely out of left field. We were like, oh, let's just pick an easy thriller. We both had Never Lie on our TBRs, and we ate that shit up.
Mm-hmm. That was so
I
good.
have a couple. One of which is Kiss Me in the Dark by Roxy Cohen. That was also a buddy read for us. I literally sat down one morning while my youngest was asleep to read it, texted Joaquin and was like, I'm going to read this entire book.
Yeah.
And I did.
We love those.
It was fantastic. Once again, Roxy's the queen of romantic suspense. If you love a thrillery vibe with a romantic subplot, she's your girl. My second one is Unexpectedly Ruined by Irene Bard. It is a romance read. It is a spicy romance read. But I sat down to read that at I want to say 5:00 one night while I was making dinner. And by the time I went to bed, I was done it.
Wow.
It was phenomenal, spicy Scottish male main character that I was obsessed with. He's an archaeologist. It's great. And yeah, it's just a really quick, fantastic, spicy romance read that gives you everything you want and you need when you're looking for that kind of book. I will leave it at that.
Mm-hmm. I actually had a second one as well. So I did one physical book, so never lie. But I actually, for one audio, I finished Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing by Matthew Perry. So this was completely out of left field for me as well, where it was like a biography, stuff like that, and not like a nonfiction, which is so crazy for me. And I remember it. It was a work day for me. I was going to the office, and my commute is god awful and long. So I started it at 6 a.m. and I finished it just that night. I don't know if it'll end up being that. I don't think it's that long where it's like an 18-hour or whatever, but I think it's just because I had work in the middle. But all day I was listening to it, and I love Matthew Perry. I love Friends.
Yeah.
But I read it obviously after he'd already passed. And since he's the one narrating the book, it just gave me so many feels. And it was his whole story of everything that happened, of why he was how he was. And it was the saddest thing ever. I can't. I literally can't. It was so good.
Yeah, I remember when you were reading this and it was like, you started it, you were like, oh my God, I can't put this down. I have to listen through this. And you hit the end of it and you were like, that was heartbreaking. It was so good.
It was so, yeah. And I went the next day, I went to 3 different bookstores to get the book, the physical book, because in the audiobook, he's saying, if you look at these pictures, and I was like, shut up, there are pictures. And there, when you look at in the hardcover has pictures of him when he was a kid and with his parents and his mom and the struggles of all that stuff. And he would be like, you see this picture when I was a kid? This is the day before, this is my birthday, when I was 6th birthday, the day before I lost all innocence of something. And
oh my God.
I can't. I can't. So one sitting, one day. Wow.
I love that.
Way to end on a positive note.
I love that. Yeah. Bring the vibes all the way back down.
Oh, do you want to do a versus as well?
Sure.
I would say this is quick and easy for us.
Yeah.
Standalone versus series.
Oh, that's not quick and easy for
really?
me.
Because I was just going to be like, sick, standalone.
It's genre dependent for me.
Okay, fantasy, standalone or series?
Probably series.
Thriller?
Standalone.
Romance?
Interconnected standalone.
Oh, what is that?
I love... Let me show you my wall of interconnected standalone romance. I love me an interconnected standalone romance. So those are romance books that you can read whatever order you want, but the people in them are recurring from the other books. So let's talk Done and Dusted series by Lila Sage, for example. The first book, you're introduced to 2 main characters. You meet said female main characters, siblings, and family. The next book is her brother and his girlfriend. The next book is her oldest brother and his girlfriend. Like, you can read them at any point because they're focused on different relationships, but you'll know if you read Done and Dusted, Swift and Saddled, Lost and Lassoed, that from book 1, this is what happened to these characters. So when you see them married by book 3, you're not surprised. But it also doesn't change the fact that they're not the main characters of book 3. So if you know they're married, it doesn't really matter. So at the end of the day, do they happen in the same place and they're connected to the same people? Yes, but the main characters of the story are different. That's my spiel.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess I'm the same way. Fantasy, I would love if it was all standalones, but now I'm thinking about it, like Empyrean series is great, one of my favorites, and then the Lorien Legacies was 7 books long too, and I enjoyed that. So I'm a liar, and Six Standalone, I'm a liar because the Lorien Legacies was my very first full completed series that I finished, so that holds a lot and very close to my heart. But and then thrillers, standalones, because could you imagine a series a thriller series that isn't like it? Just like if you think series, like I'm just thinking Goosebumps, but those are standalones that are just all in the same series. It's just
Yep.
So that doesn't make any sense. And then I don't read anything else.
Yeah, essentially, I think what it comes down to is fantasy standalones are either fantastic because they are what they are and they leave it alone, or you feel like you're missing something because fantasy does take a lot to build up. So you're either looking at a 600-page standalone or a series of 300-page books. I want the series of 300-page books every day.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know how you would have a thriller series. I can't even think of one on the top of my head.
No, unless you were trying to do something like Halloween or Michael Myers type where the guy is just in and out of and curse. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Still though.
It probably wouldn't hit the same.
Oh, I know one that has more than one book. And I gave it to you. The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell.
Oh.
There is a second book and it sucks ass.
Oh. You didn't even really like the first one either.
And I still read the second one because I'm a dumbass.
Well. I'm a liar and you're a dumbass. Okay.
And welcome to the podcast.
Okay. Well,
I think I've only ever read that one that had more than one. And it shouldn't have even been one.
Yeah, I don't think. Are there any Stephen King is their series
horror.
But that's horror.
Horror, and his most notorious series is The Dark Tower, and that's fantasy technically.
Well, I'm thinking like the Mr. Mercedes and stuff like that.
I would slot that in mystery a little bit more than thriller.
Okay, so Stephen King's just an outlier with the stuff he does. He has so many different genres anyways.
Yeah, so like the Mr. Mercedes series is based on more of an investigation principle than like thriller whodunit type vibes, you know?
Okay.
And then I think most of his other stuff is truly horror for the most part. And then Dark Tower is weird fantasy.
Could you imagine it as like a 4-part series?
It could have a prequel. I think they're doing a TV show of it actually.
They're never as good.
Could have a prequel, and it is also like 1,000 pages long.
That's what I'm saying. Gross.
And it also has 2 time periods, so technically I guess it could have been written as 2 books, like the before and the current time.
Mm-hmm.
But interconnected definitely works better for that book. A lot of people have a lot of feelings about that book, though.
That's a whole different... Stephen King's a whole episode on its own, so...
I need you to read more of it before it can be an episode on its own.
Okay. I'll get in... I do plan on getting into the Miss Mercedes one, so...
Yeah, that series is up there for me. One of my favorites, for sure.
Okay, well, you have made it to the end of the pod.
If you stuck it through all of this yapping and opinions and my insanity, we appreciate you.
As always, yes. And we will release these every Friday. You guys know the drill.
You can find us on Spotify and YouTube at the Scorpio Bookshelf.
Yes, we are now on YouTube as well, which is awesome for any of those people who are not on the Spotifys. But yeah, that is.
Thank you
it
for listening.
Bye.
Bye.